The air smells like iron and animal fat. It clings to your throat before you open your eyes. The most dangerous man in the Bible was not a warrior. He was a test God set for an entire nation. A nation that had forgotten it was being held captive. The grinding pit of Gaza is not a place. It is a sentence. Stone against stone, hour after hour. The mill wheel never stops, not even at night. Because night no longer exists for the man pushing it. Act 2, the revelation. His name is Shimshon, from the Hebrew Shamash, son of the sun. Blind in a pit, grinding grain for the enemies of God. The Philistines took his eyes with a blade in Sorek, after the woman he loved finished counting his breaths while he slept. But this is not a story about a hero who fell. This is far more disturbing. Shimshon was never meant to be a hero. He was a weapon. A very specific, very dangerous kind of weapon. And weapons that develop feelings explode in the wrong direction. God did not choose a perfect man. God chose the exact weakness the enemy would never see coming. Act 3, the call. You have been reading this account the way the Philistines wanted you to read it, as a warning about lust and stupidity. You were never meant to stop there. Watch now.
The air smells like iron and animal fat. It clings to the back of your throat before you even open your eyes. The most dangerous man in the Bible was not a warrior. He was a test that God set for an entire nation that had forgotten it was being held captive. Now look at what that test looks like from the inside. The grinding pit of Gaza is not a place. It is a sentence. Stone against stone, hour after hour. The mill wheel turns, and the sound never stops, not even at night, because night no longer exists for the man pushing it. His hands are raw where the rope has eaten the skin. His feet know every crack in that floor now, every uneven stone, because his eyes no longer work. The Philistines took those. They took them with a blade in Sorek, after the woman he loved finished counting his breaths while he slept. His name is Shimshon, Shimshon, which the Hebrew reveals as a derivative of Shemesh, meaning sun. The son of Israel, blind in a pit, grinding grain for the enemies of God. This is not a story about a hero who fell. This is a story about something far more disturbing. Because Shimshon was never supposed to be a hero in the human sense. He was a weapon. Very specific, very dangerous kind of weapon. And weapons that develop feelings tend to explode in the wrong direction. Before we go any further, if you have never stopped to ask why God would choose a man with this particular set of weaknesses to carry out a divine mandate, then you have been reading the Shimshon account the way the Philistines wanted you to read it, as a cautionary tale, as a warning about lust and stupidity. And the Hebrew text is doing something completely different with all of that.
The book of Shoftim, Shoftim, meaning judges, is the most chaotic book in the Hebrew Bible. Not by accident. Here is what matters for Shimshon, specifically. Something happened in chapter 13 that had never happened before in the entire cycle. Israel did not cry out. Not one voice, not one prayer. The people were suffering under Philistine dominion for 40 years. And the text records no collective petition, no turning toward the sky. Before a single Israelite opens their mouth, an angel appears to a barren woman in the territory of Dan, and God is already moving without being asked. Her name is not given. The text calls her simply Isha. The last time the Hebrew used that name alone, the world was still new. In Bereshit, Genesis, the first woman was Isha, before she was ever Hava, Eve. To carry that designation in a biblical narrative is to be placed inside a line of women who bear something irreversible. The angel tells her she will conceive. The angel tells her the child will be a Nazir, set apart to God from the womb. And then the angel says this: he will begin to deliver Israel from the hand of the Philistines. Begin. Not complete. Not finish. Begin. That single word has never stopped producing arguments, because it seems to shrink everything that follows. If Shimshon only begins the deliverance, then what was the point of all that power, all that wreckage, all that death? The Philistines are still standing after he dies. They will remain until David, 2 generations later, breaks their military spine for good. So what exactly is God doing here?
That is occupation at the molecular level. Not just armies and borders. The daily texture of life itself. The food you grow, the tools you use, the prices you pay. Everything filtered through Philistine control. When the text says Israel was under Philistine dominion for 40 years, it means an entire generation of Israelite children grew up having never felt what national sovereignty was. The oppression had become ordinary. The compromise had become ordinary. And in the logic of the covenant, that is the most dangerous condition a people can fall into. Not crisis, comfort inside captivity. Shimshon is born into that, into the numbness, into the generation that stopped noticing the chains. God does not send him as a political reformer or a military general or a prophet calling the nation to repentance. God sends him as something the text has never produced before and will never produce again. And here is what the entire account is actually built around. Every woman, every widow, every act of spectacular violence rooted in personal grievance rather than national strategy, none of it accidental, none of it wasted. His private destruction is itself the weapon. Say that again, slowly. His private destruction is the weapon. The unraveling of the consecrated man is not a tragedy that interrupted the mission. The unraveling is the mission. Because the people were too comfortable to want deliverance, they needed to see the cost of what they had accepted. They needed to watch the strongest man alive lose everything, not to an army, not to a god of the Philistines, not to some force worthy of the defeat, but to a pair of scissors and a woman who was paid enough to be patient. They needed to see that particular humiliation. The Nazir, the one set apart, the one touched by heaven, reduced to an animal in a grinding pit, blind, mocked, brought out at feasts so the crowd could feel the pleasure of watching something sacred become pathetic. That is what comfort inside captivity produces eventually. It produces a people who can look at the ruin of the consecrated and laugh along with the Philistines. And that is exactly the moment the text has been building towards since chapter 13. Not the moment of victory, the moment of recognition. Because the hair is growing back. It has been growing back this entire time, slowly, in the dark, while nobody was watching. The text mentions it once, almost in passing, the way you might mention weather, and then it moves on. Lets it sit there, lets the reader carry it forward. Into the feast, into the crowd assembled in the temple of Dagon, into the moment Shimshon asks the boy leading him to place his hands on the pillars, the two pillars holding the weight of everything above. And then there is a prayer, the only prayer in the entire account. The only moment this man who never once asked God for strategy, who never once interceded for his people, opens his mouth toward heaven with something other than a personal demand. The prayer is not a repentant speech. It is not a theological declaration. It is simply, "Remember me." And the pillars move.